Hello, everyone. I want to talk about something that's been on my mind for a long time, and it's my problem with nonprofits and charity based systems, especially as they exist today. I used to live in Los Angeles while I was doing my master's degree in transformational urban leadership, which is essentially learning how to help the urban poor through a Christian framework. Going into that program, I genuinely believed I was learning how to be part of the solution. I assumed the goal was to reduce poverty, reduce crime, reduce homelessness, and help people become more stable over time. What I didn't expect was how much of the system seemed designed not to eliminate suffering, but to manage it. One of the biggest things I took away from that experience is the realization that both churches and nonprofits often function as what I can only describe as a cottage industry around suffering. These programs don't exist because they're close to solving the problem. They exist because the problem exists. And if the problem were ever truly eliminated, the organizations, the grants, the donors, and the jobs would disappear too. Not all programs want to help that much either. The pay structures within the organizations can often tell you their true intentions. I remember a colleague giving a presentation about applying for a job at a nonprofit. He talked about wanting to leave almost immediately because the CEOs were driving Lamborghinis while the workers seemed just as poor as the people they were serving. He suspected fraud, and even if it wasn't technically illegal, the entire setup felt wrong. The incentives were clearly misaligned. And that wasn't the only thing. There were patterns everywhere once I knew how to look for them. The degree helped me understand how these systems operate behind the scenes, not just how they present themselves publicly. You can walk into a nonprofit or a church organization and everything can look perfect on the surface. The program can look well designed, the staff can seem motivated, the mission can sound noble, but underneath that polished exterior, there can be issues that run extremely deep. The fastest way to tell is not the mission statement, it's the demographic being served. If the community you're serving has serious problems, these problems don't disappear at the door, they come with people into the organization. And sometimes organizations are either unable or unwilling to confront those realities honestly. I once toured an organization that seemed almost flawless, but later a guest speaker came to our class and talked about that exact organization, explaining that sex trafficking was running rampant within it and leadership was doing very little to stop it. From the outside, no one would have known. You would only know if you had direct involvement or understood what to look for. Another time, I listened to someone come to class to critique church organizations working overseas. According to them, many of these groups were completely unaware of local realities. In some countries, for example, the police are also the pimps. So when a girl asked for help escaping her traffickers, the church went straight to the police, not realizing they were handing her back to the people exploiting her. They thought they were helping. In reality, they were endangering her life. During that time, one book really stood out to me called Toxic Charity. It explains how a lot of modern charity is actually harmful. Not because helping is bad, but because much of it keeps people locked in cycles instead of empowering them out of those cycles. The cycle is where the money is. The cycle is where the validation is. Breaking the cycle threatens the system itself. If someone wants proof that charity can be toxic, they don't have to look much farther than many long-term aid efforts in developing countries, where decades of well-intentioned assistance have left entire regions more dependent and less self-sustaining than they were before. At the same time, it would be wrong to say that nonprofits do not benefit anyone or that they all function the same way. I experienced a wide range of effectiveness across different nonprofits and church organizations. Some genuinely helped people improve their circumstances, while others made it easier for people to remain where they were. What made the difference was not intent, and it was not the people being served. It came down to how help was structured and how it was used. When people's goal within these systems was to stabilize and move forward, these organizations had the potential to help a lot of people. When help was treated as a way to simply get by indefinitely or as long-term lifestyle, the outcomes were very different. Before I go any further, I need to be very clear about something, because this is where people often misunderstand me. I am not interested in eliminating welfare programs, Medicaid, food assistance, or emergency support systems. These programs save lives. There will always be people who need them, and there will always be situations where immediate help is necessary. What I'm opposed to is help becoming a permanent lifestyle rather than a temporary bridge. Assistance should stabilize people so they can move forward. It should not trap people in a system with no clear exit. There's a difference between a safety net and a ceiling, and too often our systems turn safety nets into ceilings without meaning to. Poverty itself is not a fixed condition. What counts as poverty changes over time. Poverty in the Middle Ages does not look like poverty today, and poverty today will not look the same in the future. So the goal should not be to eliminate inequality entirely, because that's probably here to stay forever. The goal should be to reduce how catastrophic poverty is and increase how possible upward mobility is. In my view, the best way to do that is by encouraging systems that help people become self-sufficient rather than dependent. Help should function as a stepping stone and not a destination. That means designing incentives differently. For example, guaranteed work programs instead of long-term welfare with no transition plan. Affordable childcare for people who are working rather than systems that support people who remain dependent. As difficult as this sounds, many childcare assistance programs currently reward unemployment and can encourage long-term joblessness in order to qualify. And while people who are unemployed shouldn't be abandoned indefinitely, providing free childcare without a transition plan ends up endorsing a lifestyle that shouldn't be encouraged, while excluding working families who still can't afford care. The issue isn't childcare assistance itself, but assistance that isn't structured to support employment, mobility, and a clear path forward. Even better would be rebuilding neighborhood-based support systems for things like childcare instead of routing everything through massive state or federal bureaucracies. We already have cultural models for this. For example, carpools, mutual aid, extended family networks. These systems embedded care into daily life instead of separating it into distant programs. Companies should even think about reviving older models of housing their workers again, so schedules could synchronize and childcare could be handled through rotating duties within a community or a neighborhood support network. There's also evidence from both history and other countries that synchronizing housing, work, and childcare creates what researchers call collective efficiency. Communities function better as units. Families become more stable. Mobility increases. Poverty decreases without requiring endless expansion of government spending. At the same time, we should be honest about incentives that unintentionally reward instability. If the stated goal is to strengthen households, then systems should encourage stability rather than fragmentation. The best way to help someone is not to make assistance something they or their children rely on indefinitely. Help should be a temporary bridge towards stability. When assistance functions as a stepping stone, people have a reason to move forward instead of being stuck where they are. None of this is about blaming individuals. It's about questioning whether the systems we've built actually align with the outcomes we say we want. What I've learned is that when you investigate nonprofits and charities, you cannot trust what you initially see. You have to dig deeper. You have to examine incentives, structures, and outcomes, not just the intentions. If we want real change, we have to be willing to question systems that make us feel good but may not actually be doing any good.